Just one moment. I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. My name is Eric Baker. I'm the Deputy County Administrator, and this is the Zoom meeting to discuss preliminary land use alternatives for the 2024 Kitsap County comprehensive plan. So just one moment, let me share my screen. Excellent. So throughout the meeting tonight, you're going to see this QR code pop up on a number of slides. The important part about this is that this is the QR code that'll get you to the comprehensive plan at any time. Other ways to get there is the web address located down here at the bottom. The QR code is accesses the same page, which gives you all the access to all the documents that I'll be discussing tonight for your use either tonight, tomorrow, and as we continue to move into the process. We have a number of staff folks here today. I believe we have Melissa. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. Melissa Shoemake, Senior Planner in the Department of Community Development.
And Colin Poff.
Hey, good evening. Colin Poff. I'm the Long Range Planning Supervisor, also in the Department of Community Development.
Do we have Jim Rogers?
Hi, yeah, Jim Rogers, Long Range Planning with DCD.
And Carla?
Hello, Carla Lundgren, Long Range Planner with DCD.
And last but not least, we have Kirby with us.
She's in a different meeting until about 6:30.
That's right. I apologize for that. So let's get started. Again, this meeting has a presentation component to it. We're going to kind of go through kind of a refresher about GMA. Anyone who has seen the past presentation, some of this is going to feel very similar. We're going to talk about the main issues facing the comprehensive plan update. What exactly are land use alternatives and how were they developed? Of the three alternatives, what exactly do each one of them do, and what are some of the main policy changes that each focus on? And then there's maps and more maps. So we're going to be covering that for a certain amount of time. And then after the presentation, we are going to go into interactive breakout groups. Anybody who has been on any of these previous meetings will know how it works. You'll randomly be put into one breakout group where people will have the opportunity to ask questions, make comments about any of the alternatives, either the maps, the descriptions, the intent of any of them, and also you can ask any questions about the comprehensive plan process. This is really intended to be an interactive component, not necessarily public testimony. Obviously, anybody who wants to ensure that that specific words or specific statements are made available to the Board of County Commissioners or the Planning Commission, we really recommend that is submitted in writing to the email address compplan@kitsap.gov. And all written material will go into the record and before the Board of County Commissioners. Also, we will have 2 public hearings, which I'll cover in the future to ensure that if you have something very specific that you want to make sure is in the record verbatim, written testimony and then attendance at those Planning Commission meetings are the most valuable. If you have any questions or issues as we're kind of moving through this, and I do mean issues with Zoom, not issues with your computer. We don't have that level of tech support. Alex Jarrett and the email address down below might be able to help you with some of the Zoom aspects. So just to kind of go as high altitude as we can, the Growth Management Act is the overarching statute that requires us to balance 14 goals related to community development. They range from urban growth to reducing rural sprawl, historic preservation, protection of shorelines and critical areas, provisions of parks and open space, transportation, and other important things to our community. These need to be balanced by the local government. The statute doesn't balance any of them. And you may note some of these can conflict. All of these we need to come to some kind of equilibrium on them so that they're all being served in one way or another. And they all need to be looked at through the lens of local circumstances. Every jurisdiction is different, which means that how these types of goals are balanced for Snohomish County or the city of Bremerton may not be the same for Kitsap County based on our local circumstances. Generally, the comprehensive plan has three types of land. There's the urban land, which is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time tonight, focusing on urban growth areas where growth is intended to be directed. That's places like Kingston, Silverdale, the cities of Poulsbo, Bainbridge Island, Port Orchard, and Bremerton, and their surrounding urban growth areas. Then there's the rural areas, which are the areas that are outside urban growth areas that are intended to be protected from growth. We have a lot of existing lots out in the rural areas right now where growth is occurring. But as we plan for future growth, we are supposed to be looking very carefully to make sure we're not sending more growth into the rural areas and again, focusing that on urban areas. And then you have resource lands, which is like mining, mineral resources, timberlands, and then commercial agriculture. We do have small scale agriculture in Kitsap County, but we don't necessarily have it to a level of commercial agriculture that you might see in Skagit County or the east side of the mountains. Urban areas have urban services, sewers, sidewalks, multifamily housing, and are limited by what we call urban growth area boundaries. It's basically, you're urban on one side, you're rural on the other, never the two shall meet. And then urban services are generally prohibited in rural areas and resource lands. You're not really supposed to be extending sewer. Sidewalks are generally not found in rural areas. And again, the services are really intended to be focused in our urban growth areas that we're going to be spending time talking about tonight. The comprehensive plan is educated by, again, the Growth Management Act you see at the top, but also by two regional plans. The first of which is Vision 2050, which was developed by the Puget Sound Regional Council, which Kitsap County and its cities are members. That establishes population and employment targets, as well as a lot of goals and policies related to housing, protection of the environment, transportation, transit, things like that. And we need to be consistent with those regional goals that cover Kitsap, Snohomish, King, and Pierce counties. And then we have the countywide planning policies. That is just the county and the 4 cities, 2 tribes, and our 2 largest ports. They're through the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council. Countywide planning policies are the document that we all work on locally. That again establishes population and employment targets, so we know exactly how much growth we're supposed to be expecting over a particular time, and we all are planning towards the same goal. We also have goals and policies regarding how we are going to plan together over time. All of those lead to the comprehensive plan, which is the local document that only applies to unincorporated Kitsap County. Does not apply to any of the cities, does not apply to the tribal lands, and does not apply to the naval lands. Those are all separate entities. Cities have their own comprehensive plans. The tribal organizations do their own planning, and the Navy, incredibly important part of our economy, does their thing. So the comprehensive plan covers a whole number of elements. We're really going to be talking a lot about land use today. But again, we need to cover land use, economic development, where people are going to work, how we're going to protect the environment, how people are going to get from one place to the other safely and quickly, how people are going to have opportunities for parks and open space, either in the rural areas or in the urban areas, how there are going to be pipes in the ground that bring you water and take sewage away, as well as how you're going to have schools, fire protection, and all the other things. Housing and human services, that is an incredibly important aspect. I'll cover more in a moment, as we really need to be providing housing for a number of different income bands, which is a new initiative that I'll talk about more in a moment. And then we have some area-specific sub-area plans and neighborhood plans. So Squamish, Manchester, Kingston, Keyport, Silverdale has a regional plan. All of those are located and have specific goals and policies that focus on their areas, not necessarily the rest of the county. So what are some of the main topics we're covering in 2024? We have to update the comprehensive plan previously every 8 years. In the future, it'll be every 10. But every 8 years, we need to cover all of those aspects and all those elements of the comprehensive plan I just showed you. But some particularly important aspects that we need to focus on in 2024 is accommodating growth. That's the number of people who are moving here and the number of jobs that people are going to be working with, and where those are going to go, and in what types of buildings, what types of housing are going to be provided to accommodate that. Again, this growth is largely intended to be located inside the urban growth area boundaries, with limited amounts in the rural areas. We really need to focus on housing diversity. I think one of the things that we notice most is that homes prices and rent prices have gotten out of the reach of large quantities of our community. People who are making less than annual median income are finding it hard to find housing in Kitsap County. We need to work on that, and that is probably going to lead us to focus a lot on multifamily housing opportunities. That's everything from duplexes to apartment complexes and condominiums. We have a lot of single family residential. We need to potentially focus less on that and more on how we're going to get townhomes, fourplexes, and multifamily of a whole number of different ways to ensure that people are living close to transit, but also are living in a manner that is affordable. There are two areas that this is largely going to be focused: Silverdale and Kingston. Silverdale is our regional center. It is the second highest order of geography in Kitsap County, with the city of Bremerton being number one, and then of course Silverdale being number two. Kingston is there with the other cities. We're really supposed to be focusing, again, a lot of our growth and a lot of our jobs in these areas. In Kingston, we have that, plus we need to try to maintain the character of the area. Silverdale is likely going to be a city sometime in the future. Needs to be looking more like a 24/7 community, rather than one that people go to the shop, they leave, and it's dead by 9 o'clock at night. Climate change. We need to focus on things like greenhouse gas emissions, sea level rise, and wildfires. Obviously, if we're looking to condense growth into smaller areas where we aren't driving quite as far, we're cutting back on some greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. But there are other things like how do we address things like trees in our urban areas that reduce heat and maintain a livable community. Also, a lot of our infrastructure is located along shorelines, so roadways and sewer plants and sewer pump stations we need to ensure are being protected from sea level rise. And for those folks in the rural areas, we need to find ways that we can develop in a manner that does not establish significant wildfire risks, especially around our heritage parks. A lot of this is going to be focused on our urban growth area boundaries. We have them established now. We're going to need to review and see if we need to adjust them to accommodate growth through 2044. Currently, the urban growth area boundaries are sized for 2036. We need to accommodate 8 years of additional growth, as well as the redirection of population to places like Kingston and Silverdale. That'll be taking more than we have planned for in the past due to their location next to high capacity transit, ferries, and bus service. So that kind of leads to the three alternatives that we have posted on our website. How have we gotten to this point? Well, first of all, what are the alternatives? There are three alternatives. None of them are a recommendation. There is not one that the county says is the one that we believe we should go with. It's a menu approach. There are pieces of all the alternatives that have value, and through the process and through the environmental review, and as we move into the fall, we'll be able to take information from these three alternatives and put together a preferred alternative. So just please view these alternatives as a menu approach, not necessarily there's one that the county likes that they want to go with and all the others are just window dressing. It's meant to test various strategies, different regulation changes, different incentives, different amounts of growth going into certain areas, growth going into larger areas. So again, we're supposed to test all this through environmental impact statement. So these alternatives, when decided upon by the board in March, which will be the three that then will get environmental review, you'll get to see exactly how those alternatives affect water quality, wetlands and streams, how it affects our roadways. Also, it will lay into exactly how much all of this is going to cost. How much are those roadway improvements going to cost at a planning level? How about sewer? How many additional schools are we going to need? Police services, parks and open space, all of that is going to be covered after we establish these three alternatives, which this is just the starting point for. How did we get to this point? We basically took into consideration a series of reclassification requests we received over the summer. Those are people who wanted a different zone or a different intensity of use for their property. We looked at the growth projections of Vision 2050 and the countywide planning policies for jobs and employment. We looked at the various goals and policies of the Growth Management Act. We also took into account a lot of the testimony that we heard over the course of the last year in a lot of these meetings. And we crafted three alternatives, which I'll describe here in a moment. But the thing I want to hammer home, and I'll probably say more often than you'll like to hear, this is just the starting point. What you see here today, and even after the Board of County Commissioners selects three alternatives in March, that is just the beginning of the conversation. There is additional analysis that needs to be done, and then in the fall, we'll be working to determine one preferred alternative from the three based on the information we get from the environmental impact statement and capital facilities plan. So what are the three alternatives? The first of which, there always needs to be a no action. If we don't do anything, what happens? Well, that no action roughly acts as our baseline. It does not accommodate the growth that we are seeing, and is not going to be able to be operated on its own. However, there might be pieces of not doing anything that the county and the public may want to see in that preferred alternative. But mainly, it is our baseline that we're comparing the other two alternatives against. So alternative two, this is our compact growth urban center focus. This is really not looking at how we've grown in the past. This is looking at how Vision 2050 and the countywide planning policies are intending us to grow. And again, that is around high capacity transit communities. Silverdale and Kingston are expected to take a substantial amount of that, as well as all our incorporated cities. That puts a huge emphasis on transit. You can't have density without reasonable transit service. Growth is promoted in the downtown areas, so it isn't just all of Silverdale. We are really looking at the area of Silverdale that is in the pretty much surrounded by the highways, the area where the mall and the hospital and all those are located. How can we encourage redevelopment of that area that includes housing, as well as jobs, retail, services that you see there today? How can we balance that out to create a more walkable, fully contained community in certain ways, versus, again, everybody driving from wherever they came from into Silverdale, shopping, eating, and then driving home? Also, this alternative increases housing diversity. It really puts forth a lot of incentives and potential regulatory changes that incentivizes multifamily housing, as well as townhomes, row housing, cottage housing in our single family zones. So instead of just single family detached housing that unfortunately on its whole has moved out of the range of affordability, either to rent or to own for so many members of our public, we need to provide additional opportunities for infill and redevelopment that again trends towards multifamily in this alternative. It also reduces pressure and growth in the rural areas by keeping the urban growth area boundaries limited and not changing rural densities. So there are some folks who requested changes in the rural areas. They wanted to go from 10-acre zoning to 5-acre zoning, maybe do 2 homes instead of 1. The alternative 2 does not include any of those. So this alternative generally meets our population and employment growth targets. It increases housing diversity, again, through incentives and regulatory changes, with the focus on the downtowns of Kingston and Silverdale and the areas around the cities. It uses property tax programs, expedited permitting, and potentially regulatory flexibility to, again, incentivize this. We are trying not to force development in this alternative in a particular way. We are attempting to incentivize it. No alterations to rural uses, like I just indicated. Transit, when I indicated investment in transit is important, this alternative really is pushing for transit to provide 30-minute frequencies within urban centers. We have a lot of transit that'll get you from Silverdale to Poulsbo to Bainbridge Island, but it is that regular bus service that is so important for folks to decide, I don't need 2 cars, instead I need 1, or I can get around without a vehicle. And then also to, again, try to address those greenhouse gas emissions, we do establish greenhouse gas emission targets, similar to how the other counties around us have done or are doing. And then additionally, there are tree replacement requirements being proposed, which basically after a development comes in, they need to plant a certain number of trees. That way it can work around the development. The development doesn't have to work around the trees. It also expands electric charging opportunities, bike lanes, and additional sidewalks to create a more walkable community within a certain distance of transit. So alternative 3 is closer to kind of how we've grown in the past, which is we're still very single family focused in this alternative. We aren't doing any of the incentives of the regulations that you see in the downtown areas to, again, try to incentivize people to move into downtown Silverdale. Instead, we maintain, again, our single family focus. We ensure that there is additional opportunity for businesses and homes, both in the urban areas and some additional opportunities in the rural areas. And then it also assumes the impacts of new policies that require more land for development in urban areas. What does that mean? When you take a look at this, you kind of assume that this is kind of the biggest alternative that really doesn't serve the environment 100%. There are elements of this alternative that do serve the environment, such as tree retention policies. You remember previously I mentioned tree replacement, where you build, then you replace the trees. This alternative looks at if a certain percentage of a development has to stay in tree canopy. Thus, the development has to build around the trees. Thus, you need more land to accommodate the same number of people. Thus, again, you may need larger urban growth area boundaries. So this dispersed growth alternative kind of has, again, a larger UGA, but also certain environmental programs that, again, can improve certain things like greenhouse gas emissions and heat blooms and other things such as that. So I kind of went through all of this already. I probably should have remembered what I put in all of these. Again, transit and non-motorized and the incentives for the downtown really remain at current levels. We're not cutting back on anything in this alternative. We just aren't doing anything more in it. We're just staying the way it is in today's code. So I'm going to try not to go through all of these maps ad nauseum. Anyone who saw the Planning Commission meeting or saw the Board of County Commissioners briefing saw me go through each of these maps, and I think their eyes rolled back in their heads about, oh, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes in. So I'm going to try to kind of hit on some of the key components of each of these maps. Again, you see the QR code at the bottom. QR code will send you to our website where all of these maps are located, and for all of our urban growth areas, as well as countywide maps, so you can see all the rural areas as well. But just to highlight some of those, this is Kingston as you see today. This is the Arborwood development located down south, ferry terminal, the kind of the old town area, and then the commercial area to the north. Alternative 2, this map only shows the changes that are being proposed. So the urban growth area is being proposed to be expanded in Alternative 2 by adding some land to the south. The portion of the Arborwood development was left out of the UGA. It was always allowed to develop, even if it was in the rural area as urban. So bringing it into the UGA just makes logical sense. It adds additional urban medium, which again is multifamily housing here along Lindvog Road. It also adds some additional urban village center, which again is a mixed use zone on these port properties located here next to the Port of Kingston. Additionally, we are looking at increasing heights and increasing allowed densities in the commercial area, which again is the area around the grocery store, some of the fast food restaurants in this area for future redevelopment. Alternative 3, again, now we're not doing those incentives in the downtown area, but it does add additional land up here, further up Lindvog Road, some additional opportunities south of West Kingston Road, and then the others that I described previously. Poulsbo, Poulsbo is a very small urban growth area boundary. They really focus most of their growth inside their existing city. They're proposing very little expansion of the urban growth area boundary and very little change. You'll note here in alternative 2 and 3, all they're looking to add is Snyder Field. Anybody who's driven up Highway 3 knows the ball side. They're in the process of ownership of those fields. Thus, they want to bring it into the urban growth area so they can potentially annex it. That is the only change that is being proposed in the Poulsbo urban growth area. Silverdale, here's where I'm going to spend a certain time, as it is the area that had the largest population, the largest employment growth, but also is one of the areas that is entirely unincorporated into itself, and we need to also keep an eye on its future someday as a city. So this is alternative 1. This is the Ridgetop community coming up Ridgetop Boulevard, Silverdale Way. You come down past the skate park, and then you cross the highway and into downtown. Here is the Kitsap Mall, Buckland Hill Bridge located through here. When I'm talking about alternative 2 here in a minute, I'm really going to be talking about, again, incentives in this area down here for redevelopment as redevelopment becomes attractive over time. So what you see here is you see that in this alternative, there is some rezoning that's occurring. This area that was single urban low is now being proposed to be rezoned to multifamily urban medium. There is some additional urban medium and the business center, which is an employment zone, being changed up in here. But I think the two key components that in regards to urban growth area expansions in alternative 2 are these 2 parcels located on either side of Silverdale Way heading up to Poulsbo that are being proposed to be zoned urban low. These will allow for a certain amount of single family development to go along with, again, a majority of our growth and a majority of our population and employment is being focused in the downtown area through redevelopment and through multifamily. However, we do have a few additional opportunities for single family in alternative 2. So again, incentives and regulatory changes to help the downtown redevelop over time. Remember, this is a 20-year plan. No aspects that this is going to happen tomorrow. It is intended to happen gradually over 20 years. Alternative 3 adds additional land. It adds, this is the church camp that is currently thinking about redevelopment. This adds a significant amount of additional land to it and south of this development, just on the other side of Island Lake. I've already talked about these 2 properties. It also adds a certain amount of urban restricted. This is, I believe, Sterling Heights, located here along Anderson Road. These are urban development on sewer. Remember, I mentioned sewer isn't supposed to be in the rural area. It wasn't an urban area at one time, and we had to contract the growth area boundary, leaving this development out in the rural area. In alternative 3, it is proposed to include back in. And then also you have additional expansion. There is a rural corridor through here between Central Kitsap and between Silverdale. This proposes that a portion of that for urban low. When we do CK, see some of the same on the other side. So the Central Kitsap, this is alternative 1. There are not a significant number of changes other than a number of lots located up through here in alternatives 2 and 3 that I'll discuss in a moment. But the one thing I do want to mention about the Central Kitsap urban growth area, it abuts the city of Bremerton, but unlike the East Bremerton and West Bremerton UGAs, the Poulsbo UGA, the Port Orchard UGA is not associated with the city of Bremerton. It stands alone. During the comprehensive plan process, we are going to have to discuss the future of this area in regards to annexation and/or incorporation. The city is very interested in this area being associated to them. They can begin to take responsibility for it over time. That has not happened as of yet, but will be an important conversation and has historically been an important conversation. So looking at the changes in alternative 2, there's very, very few. There are a couple changes here along the highway where a place that is rural commercials become urban. And then I've got this other thing over here. We establish a center around the McWilliams court, the McWilliams intersection, which then allows for additional incentives potentially, as well as regulatory changes to incentivize multifamily development in this corridor, which is again located next to the school, next to the Safeway and other amenities. And then when you move to alternative two, this is again that Barker Creek corridor. That one little thing that I showed you coming in from Silverdale is right there. There's some additional properties that are wishing to become urban and allow urban development, either urban low, which is single family, or urban restricted, which is very, very low density single family. In West Bremerton, yes, the urban growth area looks weird. The city is everything here. Everything located around here in black are the urban growth area boundaries. So we have certain areas that are entirely surrounded, like Rocky Point, West Hills, Navy Yard City, by the city of Bremerton. The city of Bremerton has requested some changes to its urban growth area boundary, largely due to the fact that they have sewer infrastructure that has been installed up in this area. So they are requesting urban growth area expansions and alternative two for this area here, this area here. West Bremerton UGA has a very small population target. Most of all the population is going into downtown Bremerton, but they are asking for additional opportunities here. And then there at the end of Warner Road, there is a proposal to take what is currently an old rock quarry owned by Uland and turn it into urban industrial. That is a proposal from Uland, and a portion of that proposal is included in alternative two. What happens in alternative three? Generally, everything else stays the same. There is a little additional urban low and low density residential that's put through here. And then there is the entirety of the Uland request, which is a significantly greater amount of land, again, for urban industrial to provide jobs over time. Moving down to the Puget, P6 stands for Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton. Spelling just takes a lot more space. So this is the Bremerton National Airport. This is also the city of Bremerton. The city of Bremerton extends all the way down to the Bremerton National Airport and out to Mason County. So there are some requests for rezones in alternative two, or actually there are none in alternative two. So alternative two is exactly that it is today. Alternative three proposes additional industrial and commercial opportunities on the north side of Highway 3. This is south the Lake Flora Road intersection. This is just before you get to that. These are, again, planning for additional industrial uses, providing additional jobs for the south area. And then lastly, we're looking at here is we are looking at the South Kitsap urban growth area boundary. The city of Port Orchard, sorry, I think I said Port Orchard urban growth area boundary. The city of Port Orchard has a very sizable amount of capacity, mainly in the McCormick area. Anybody who's driven out in the McCormick area notes all the housing that's going up there. There's a substantial amount remaining, as well as other multifamily projects that are going on. So the changes to the South Kitsap, to the Port Orchard urban growth area are limited. And generally, areas that are being proposed is a small inclusion up here by McCormick, a small inclusion of industrial and urban medium down here at the Sydney Road intersection, and then the retraction of a portion of the UGA located along at the gully right by Salmonberry Creek, not too far from Long Lake. There is some additional commercial also proposed in alternative two. Alternative three relooks at the Bethel corridor south of, this is Fred Meyer. So the area south of the highway, south of Sedgwick Road and down Bethel. And instead of residential, this area would become commercial. So changes in the rural areas, like I mentioned, alternative two does not include any changes in the rural area, but alternative three does. And we did receive a reclassification request from a number of individuals requesting a change in zoning. For example, this property here, this is North Kitsap Heritage Park. These are 20-acre parcels located next to it. That individual has requested that it go from 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres to 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. That would be double the density. The main request in the rural area that is really important to take note of is 400 acres that's proposed to move from rural wooded, again, 1 unit per 20 acres, to rural residential, 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, being proposed by the Rainier Company. They are interested in additional development opportunities in that area. That is the largest of our reports. To the county, again, here we are off Lake Helena, Glenwood, James Dickinson. You have some additional pieces. So is everybody still hearing me? Can one of the staff raise their thumb if they can still hear me? Okay, there we go. We're going to talk about, before we break to breakout groups, is what's absent from the alternatives. We have 3 alternatives. In alternative 3, we included a lot of the reclassification, a lot of other. However, there are certain classes currently any of the alternatives. If you're not in the alternatives, you're not able to be considered later on. What are some of the qualities of these? Some of those are requesting urban zones in rural areas. So they want urban restricted, 1 to 5 dwelling units an acre out in a rural area. They want to expand of more intensive rural development. Sorry for that acronym. That's Suquamish, that's Manchester, that's Keyport. They want to expand boundaries. Statutorily is not allowed to be done. Once the boundary of those communities, that boundary is set. Some other folks are looking for rural zoning that does not exist. If ever anyone who's lived here for 20 or 30 years probably remembers the days of 1 acre zoning in the rural areas, or 2.5 acre lot sizes in the rural areas. That does not exist anymore. We actually had our comp plan stricken down for things just like that. Accommodate those. And then there are some that are spot zones. These are individual requests for a zone change surrounded in its entirety by another zone. So at that point, you're in a position where you pretty much just in one piece and not all the surrounding area, which doesn't work for certain zone protection that's based upon protecting wet systems, stream corridors, and things like that. So with that, I'm going to pause mercifully, and we're going to go into breakout groups. I have heard my email go off a lot, as well as the chat. Let me double check and make sure. Oh, that would have been great to turn my camera off a long time ago. So with that, let's go breakout groups. I apologize that apparently I was breaking up and did not know it. So Alex, with that, do you want to break up?
Yes, how many would you like? We've got 31 participants, including staff. Do you want me to do 3?
31 and including staff, let's do 2.
Let's do 2, okay. I will get that. It'll just take a second for everybody to be dispersed into groups. Hi there, this is Alex. I see that you're still out here in the main room. I wasn't sure if you wanted to go over to a breakout group.
I would, thank you. I think the Zoom tipped over on my end and stopped, and when I rejoined, that was after you had made the assignments to the breakout rooms.
Okay, I will move you over, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, let's see if I can figure this out though. Hi Kirby. I will move you in a second as well. Trying to remember how to move him to a breakout group. Here we go.
How many breakout rooms do we have?
We have 2. Okay, Bill, I'm moving you over to room 1.
Okay,
And Kirby, I'm gonna move you in with Eric and Jim, but let me make you a co-host first.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm gonna move you into room 1 as well. Off you go.
Well, I have learned a very valuable lesson tonight. I hope everyone learned something, but what I learned is when your email is blowing up in the middle of a presentation, pick up the email. Don't worry about it being distracting to your presentation, especially if nobody can hear it. So I want to apologize to everybody for that. There is another one coming up. Once everybody comes over, we'll kind of conclude, which really kind of covers next steps. Can everybody hear me? Am I breaking up again?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
breaking up a little, but it's not as bad as it was.
I'm just going to drop out of video. How about now?
It's better.
Fine.
You can't see me shaking my head in disgust. Alex, is everybody back?
I think so.
All right.
I'm not
Yes.
Alex, but we're at almost the same total. I think people might have.
Looks like
dropped
we're all
out.
here.
All right. So,
Yes, it looks like we're all here.
okay. So, basically, I guess I'll invert these two slides. How are we going to move between now and March 22nd? As I indicated, over the next 6 weeks, the board needs to select sideboards for environmental review, alternatives 1, 2, and 3, so that we can begin doing environmental review, which is roughly about a 6-month period, 6-month period of time to get that document completed. As you see here, we're on public meeting number 1, so February 9th. We have another one next week, which I will be doing from my actual office, not my home office. And then we have a planning commission public hearing. What's the difference between these public meetings and the planning commission public hearing? The public meetings, again, are this workshop format where people are able to talk and provide comment. But the planning commission is an entity that reviews plans such as this and provides commentary to the Board of County Commissioners. The Planning Commission would be an excellent place for people to submit written testimony and also to come in and testify either in person or via Zoom. So I strongly recommend anybody who has specific comments they want to make, February 21st would be the first opportunity for you to do that in a formal manner. We then also have a public meeting, number 3, which is really an open house. We're doing these Zoom workshops. We're going to be in person. I don't think we can break up in person. So we're going to be going, and there's going to be booths for the varying areas around, and people can kind of come talk to staff, advocate for particular things, oppose other things, and mainly get information so that as we move to the board public hearing on March 13th, people can feel as educated about the alternatives, about the process, and can fully determine exactly how they feel on various things and exactly what they might like to see changed in the alternatives, or if there's just one alternative that they really like and they don't like any of the others. Again, it's entirely up to the public as to exactly how they want to respond to any of this. From the public hearing, the board will then have the written comment period will close a few days later. And then over the next week, the board will deliberate on exactly what those sideboards look like. Am I breaking up?
You're good.
Just a little.
Okay. I heard someone sigh in exasperation. So that's kind of how things are going to move forward. So some of the key dates, again, if you really want to hear my presentation that hopefully doesn't break up, I'll see you on the 15th. Otherwise, you do have the hearing on the 21st, and most importantly, the hearing on March 13th. Also, for those of you in the Central Kitsap community, the Central Kitsap Community Council will be having one on March 1st. So please attend that. You can find information about that on the CKCC, Central Kitsap Community Council webpage. So after we do all this, there's been a lot of question about what exactly happens after. After the board selects 3 alternatives, what happens? Well, after that, we develop the environmental impact statement. We develop revised goals and policies and regulations. Those can apply to individual alternatives or all the alternatives. Those will all be released to the public in September, and then from September through the end of December, and probably when I say December, I kind of mean January. So I expect that probably there's going to be some early 24 discussion. We'll be coming up with a preferred alternative. That's where, based on all the environmental review, all the prospective impacts and costs related to it, the board selects one alternative for growth moving forward over the next 20 years. We then do the final EIS, which looks at the environmental impacts of that one alternative. So in case there's substantial changes from any one of the 3 previous ones, we know that we've got the correct information for the one that the board chose to move forward with. All that information, as well as revised capital facility and capital facilities plan and regulations, would come out in March 24, with the idea being that the board would approve a final document in August of 24. I know it feels early. There was the question of why do we have to make all these decisions now? Part of it is because this takes a long time, and we don't want to shorten either A, the time to do the environmental analysis, or worse, shorten the time for public comment. So we are ending a few months early on this. We do really have until December. I'm pretty certain some of these dates are going to slip as we start moving forward. So it's always best to provide a little more time than a little less time. So I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. Again, I really apologize for the technical difficulties that continued and probably the limited utility of my presentation. We will try to find a better way to get that presentation on the website for people who cannot attend the one on the 15th. Also, a similar version will be given at the Planning Commission meeting as well. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to hear the same thing again, hopefully this time in its entirety. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I definitely welcome everybody to attend again next week. I'd love to see everybody's faces as often as we can. And again, I apologize. Wait, we have one question before we cut out. Carla, do you think it's good for me to kind of run through these questions before we leave? I guess we do have a
Oh,
little.
no, I was just sharing them with our group so we could have them.
Now you got me paranoid. Now
Sorry.
it's like, something
I
popped
should have
up.
waited till you were done.
Okay, I'll be fine. All right, no more hyperventilating. So with that, I really want to thank everybody for coming. I look forward to seeing everybody next time. And again, please provide as much commentary as you can, both in writing. And if any questions come up, please visit the comprehensive plan website, email the email address, and you will be getting responses. And then also you can call and you can talk to Colin, Melissa, Carla, Jim, or Kirby on any of the various issues that come up. So again, I appreciate everybody's time tonight, and I will apologize one last time because my Catholic guilt is killing me. Night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Is it that Martha that was talking about the environment?